On death row, Daniel Reed made a single request. He didn't ask for a special meal. He didn't ask for a phone call. He just wanted to see his dog. Toby, a scruffy mutt with grey in his fur and kindness in his eyes, was the last piece of a life Daniel barely remembered. But when the guards opened that cell door, what they witnessed changed everything, because what seemed like a goodbye became something no one could have imagined. The hallway was silent, except for the distant sound of a clock ticking, the kind of silence that wraps around your chest and makes it hard to breathe. Officer Mitchell stood outside Daniel's cell, hands trembling slightly as he held the leash. On the other end, Toby wagged his tail, unaware of the gravity of the moment. Inside, Daniel sat still on the edge of his bed, staring at the ground. The years had carved deep lines into his face, but his eyes lit up the moment he heard the faint scratch of paws against concrete. He stood slowly and stepped toward the bars. Toby saw him, and in a heartbeat, the dog was at the door, whining, jumping, trying to reach him. Daniel fell to his knees. He pressed his face against the bars, and Toby licked him through the cold steel. Guards watched in stunned silence. Some turned their faces away. Others didn't bother hiding their tears. No one expected what came next, because Daniel didn't just fall apart. He whispered something to the dog, words no one could hear. And what happened after that would not only shake the prison to its core, but rewrite the story of a man the world had already forgotten. What no one imagined was just the beginning, ready to uncover thrilling twists that touch the soul and reveal the extraordinary. Subscribe now, activate the bell for exclusive access to every impactful moment, and join our community. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Daniel Reed was born in a forgotten corner of Jackson, Mississippi, in a two-room house with a leaking roof, and a mother who did her best until life wore her down. His father left before he turned 4. His older brother, Anthony, became his hero and his shield. Daniel wasn't a bad kid. He was quiet, observant, and fiercely loyal to those he loved. He didn't have much, but he had dreams. He wanted to be a veterinarian, not just because he loved animals, but because they loved him back, unconditionally. That love found its shape when he was 10. A neighbor abandoned a litter of puppies in a ditch by the railroad tracks. Daniel found them, shivering and wet. He took the runt, the one with the crooked tail and the golden eyes, and named him Toby. From that moment, Daniel had a reason to come home every day. No matter how loud the shouting got inside his house, no matter how many nights his stomach growled, Toby was there, tail wagging, licking tears from his face, curling up against him when the nightmares came. They grew up together. Toby was at his side when Anthony gave him his first real birthday present. He was there the night Daniel cried after failing a test he studied for all week. And he was there the night everything changed. Daniel tried to stay on the right path. He studied late into the night, worked part-time at a mechanic shop, and even got a teacher to help him prepare for a scholarship exam. But the streets had long arms, and even longer memories. When Anthony got caught up in trouble, something about money, a misunderstanding, a threat, Daniel tried to fix it. And that's when the dream began to die. But through it all, Toby stayed. Through the chaos, the mistakes, the silence that followed, that dog never once left his side, not until the cell door closed behind him. Long before the courtroom, before the cell, before the sentence, Daniel had a dream. It was small, quiet, and almost laughably innocent for a kid growing up where he did. He wanted to open a little clinic. Nothing fancy, just a place where people could bring their pets without worrying about money. He wanted to heal animals, to be the one who fixed what others gave up on. Toby was his first patient. Daniel made a habit of listening to his heartbeat with an old stethoscope he found at a church garage sale. He learned how to clean wounds using water, salt, and strips of clean cloth. When Toby got a nasty cut on his paw, Daniel stayed up all night beside him, whispering that he'd be okay. His science teacher, Mr. Langford, noticed his curiosity. He started lending Daniel old textbooks, printed articles, anything he thought might feed that spark. "You've got the hands of a healer," he once said, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. It was the first time in years someone had told Daniel he was meant for something good. At school, Daniel sat in the front row, asked questions no one else dared to, and aced every biology test. But when the final bell rang, he went home to peeling paint, unpaid bills, and a mother so tired her silence spoke louder than any words. He saved up from fixing bikes and changing oil at a local shop. He hid the money in an old shoebox under his bed, labeled with a torn piece of paper, Vet School. But dreams have enemies. Quiet ones like hunger, louder ones like desperation, and deadly ones like the streets. When Anthony got into trouble with some local guys, Daniel tried to help. It was supposed to be a quick fix, a favor, a loan, a warning delivered, something small. Instead, it spiraled. Words turned into threats, threats turned into weapons, and before Daniel could even understand what he'd stepped into, his dream, his quiet, stubborn little dream, began slipping through his fingers like sand. And still through it all, Toby watched him, waiting, trusting, loving. It happened on a Thursday night. The kind of night where the air feels heavy, like it knows something terrible is coming. Anthony had been missing for 2 days. Daniel found out through a friend that he owed money to people who didn't make polite reminders. When Anthony finally came home, he was bleeding. Not bad enough to need a hospital, but enough to scare them both. Daniel knew then that talking wasn't going to fix anything. He had to act. A guy named Rico offered him a way out. Just one job, he said. In and out. No one gets hurt. Quick money. Daniel hesitated. Toby barked at Rico like he could smell what Daniel couldn't. But Daniel said yes. He told himself it was for Anthony, that once it was done, he'd go back to saving, back to school, back to Toby. The job was a robbery, a liquor store run by an old man named Harris who'd been behind that counter for 40 years. Daniel wasn't supposed to carry a weapon, but Rico brought one anyway. Everything went wrong. A scream, a struggle, a single shot. Mr. Harris died on the floor, eyes wide open. Daniel stood frozen, blood on his hands, not because he pulled the trigger, but because he didn't stop it. They ran. But it didn't take long. Cameras caught everything. Rico turned on him in the first hour of interrogation. Daniel was tried as an adult. The prosecution called him a cold accomplice. The judge called it felony murder. Life in prison, eligible for death because someone died during the crime. He was 18. At the sentencing, Daniel looked for his mother in the crowd. She wasn't there. The only familiar face was Officer Mitchell, who had watched him grow up and shook his head like something sacred had just broken. Toby was taken in by a neighbor. Daniel asked if he could say goodbye. They said no. That night, Daniel lay on a prison cot, staring at the ceiling, remembering the feel of Toby's fur under his hands. And he wept, for the man he would never become, for the life he lost, and for the dog who didn't understand why he never came back. The days blurred. First weeks, then months, then years. Daniel sat in a cage of concrete and steel, counting time by the sound of footsteps and the flicker of fluorescent lights. On death row, hope doesn't die all at once. It rots slowly, like food left too long in the sun. In the beginning, he still believed someone would come. His mother, maybe. Anthony, if he was still alive, a letter, a visit, anything. But no one came. His name faded from the outside world like chalk washed from a sidewalk. The other inmates called him the vet, mocking the only thing he ever wanted to be. He didn't fight back. What was the point? He stopped speaking unless he had to, stopped eating anything but what was necessary to survive. Some nights, he stayed awake just to remember the sound of Toby's paws on the wooden floor. The way the dog would nudge open his bedroom door, curl up beside him, and fall asleep with a sigh. He dreamed of that sigh more than once. 3 years in, he tried to end it. The guards found him in the corner of his cell, with blood on his wrists and a toothbrush broken into pieces. They patched him up, assigned him a psychologist, sent in Father Coleman, but Daniel didn't speak to them. Not until a small envelope arrived. No return address. Just his name. Inside was a photo, aged and wrinkled. Toby, lying in the sun, eyes closed, tongue out, same crooked tail. On the back, a single sentence, "He's still waiting for you." Daniel broke. He clutched the photo like it could anchor him to the earth. He cried until he couldn't breathe. For the first time in years, he said the dog's name out loud. "Toby," he wrote back. He didn't know where to send it, but he wrote, page after page, about the nights they spent under the stars, the way Toby would chase his own tail, the time they got caught in a storm and Toby barked until someone found them. He kept writing. That became his lifeline. The guards noticed. He began speaking with Father Coleman. He still didn't believe in forgiveness, but he started to believe in memory. And then one day, the warden asked him if he had a final request. He didn't hesitate. "I want to see my dog." Daniel gradually rediscovers his humanity, driven by a memory and a hope. If this search for meaning and the power of a genuine connection also resonate with you, show your support with a like. We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. What bond of affection has transformed you or given you hope the moment he said it? "I want to see my dog." Something shifted. Not just in the room, but inside him. It was the first time in years Daniel asked for anything. The first time he believed he might deserve even a moment of peace. At first, the prison staff thought it was a joke, but Officer Mitchell didn't laugh. He remembered Daniel as a boy, walking home from school with that mangy pup trailing behind him. He made the calls, pulled the strings, and against all odds, the request was approved. While they arranged it, Daniel waited. Each day became lighter, not because his sentence had changed, but because something inside him had. He began to speak again, slowly, awkwardly, like someone relearning a language. With Father Coleman, he talked about Toby. With Dean Harper, the prison psychologist, he talked about guilt. And in his cell, late at night, he talked to the walls as if Toby could hear him. One night, while staring at the photo, Daniel whispered, "I was more human when you were around." That thought haunted him. Because it was true. The dog hadn't just been a pet. He'd been his anchor, his conscience, his last connection to the version of Daniel that still believed in kindness. He started writing again, not letters, but apologies. Real ones, honest ones, to the Harris family, to his mother, to Anthony, wherever he was. He didn't know if they'd read them, but it wasn't about that anymore. It was about saying what he never could. And finally, after nearly a decade of silence, Daniel whispered something to Father Coleman. "If he comes, I don't want to die angry." Die? The day they confirmed Toby was still alive, Daniel sat in stunned silence. The dog was old now, grey around the muzzle, slower on his feet. But he was alive, living with a retired neighbor who had taken him in all those years ago. And he still responded to Daniel's name. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He spent the hours before dawn writing. He wrote about everything. The robbery, the fear, the moment he realized he couldn't undo what had been done. He admitted he had been a coward, that he didn't try to stop Rico, that he froze, that Mr. Harris had looked into his eyes before dying, and that he never forgot it. But he also wrote about Toby, about the nights they slept under the stars, the way he'd bark at passing cars like he was guarding a castle, the comfort of his weight against Daniel's chest on nights when the world felt too heavy. He began reading books again, talking more openly with Dean Harper. He even joined a small prison discussion group, mostly older men, where they shared regrets without expecting pity. Daniel didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't think he deserved it, but he began trying to be someone Toby wouldn't be ashamed to recognize. When Officer Mitchell handed him a leash and said, "He's coming next week," Daniel didn't know what to say. He just nodded, gripping the worn fabric like it was a lifeline. The countdown began. Not to his execution, but to that one final moment. A reunion, a chance to hold on to the only living thing that had never stopped loving him, and a moment of truth. As the day approached, Daniel began to unravel. The walls of his cell felt closer, the nights longer. He'd come so far. more than he ever expected. But fear crept in like a fog he couldn't shake. What if Toby didn't remember him? What if this one final thing, this last piece of peace, was taken away too? He had dreams. In them, Toby looked at him and turned away. In some, the dog didn't come at all. Other nights, it was Mr. Harris's face he saw, staring at him in silence, while Toby barked in the distance. Daniel stopped writing, stopped talking. Father Coleman noticed the change and came more often. "You're not who you were," he reminded him gently, "but you're still afraid of being him again." Daniel nodded. He didn't trust himself. He didn't trust the moment. Then the morning came. The guards were different. Quiet, almost reverent. Officer Mitchell avoided eye contact. The warden himself was there, and Daniel, dressed in plain grey, was led outside to a small gated yard. The gate opened. Toby stood there, old, shaky, but very much alive. He looked up. For a second, just a second, he hesitated. Then the tail wagged and Daniel dropped to his knees. The dog rushed forward, paws hitting his chest, tongue on his face, heart beating against heart. Daniel sobbed, not for the crime, not for the years lost, but because after everything Toby still knew him, still loved him. And in that moment, Daniel Reed, convicted, condemned, and forgotten, felt human again. The yard was quiet, but inside Daniel's chest, everything thundered. Toby was pressed against him, tail thumping, his body trembling with age. But still, he clung to Daniel like no time had passed at all. And Daniel clung back like he'd been drowning for years and had just surfaced for air. Officers stood frozen, some turning away, others blinking back tears they didn't expect to feel for a condemned man. Father Coleman stood silently at the edge of the yard, whispering a prayer not of salvation, but of gratitude. Because sometimes grace doesn't arrive through miracles, but through a dog with cloudy eyes and a faithful heart. Daniel whispered into Toby's ear. No one heard the words, but the dog responded with a soft whimper and rested his head on Daniel's lap. Then, without warning, the warden received a call. He stepped aside, listening quietly. His face changed, confusion first, then disbelief. When he returned, he looked at Daniel and cleared his throat. "There's been a development," he said. "Sarah Miller, daughter of Mr. Harris, the man Daniel had unintentionally helped kill, had received his letter. She watched the video Daniel recorded for her, and after months of silence, she filed a petition, not for a pardon, but for a stay of execution. Her words were simple. I don't know if I forgive him, but I believe he's not the same man. I believe someone should live if they've learned how to carry what they've done." Daniel sat in shock. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just stared at the sky. Toby still in his lap, as the clouds shifted above. The execution was suspended indefinitely. Daniel was returned to his cell, but everything had changed. He wasn't walking toward death anymore. He was walking toward something else. He didn't know what, but it was something. And every night, he fell asleep with the memory of fur beneath his fingers and the weight of forgiveness, still uncertain, still fragile, resting on his chest like the soft rhythm of an old dog's breath. Some stories don't end with triumph. They end with truth. Daniel Reed was never declared innocent. He never escaped the consequences of his choices. But he did something far more rare. He changed, not for an audience, not for freedom, but because something in him refused to die completely. All it took was a heartbeat, a pair of tired eyes, a tail wagging despite the years. Toby wasn't just a dog. He was memory. He was loyalty. He was the only witness to the version of Daniel the world had forgotten, the boy who wanted to heal, not harm, the boy who dreamed instead of destroyed. In the end, the lesson isn't about redemption being earned. It's about it being possible. Through one final request, Daniel reached for something pure, and what he found wasn't forgiveness wrapped in grand gestures or legal mercy. It was a moment, a single, breathtaking moment that proved love, real love, remembers even what the world tries to erase. Because sometimes all it takes to save a soul is a dog who never stopped waiting. Daniel wasn't released. His sentence was converted to life without parole, but within the walls that once held only regret, something new took root. He began working in the prison library, organizing books, recommending titles, mentoring younger inmates who reminded him too much of his former self. He never stopped writing letters, journals, essays. Eventually, with Father Coleman's help, his story was compiled into a memoir titled Still Waiting, later distributed in juvenile centers across the country. Toby lived another year. He spent it visiting Daniel monthly, resting beside his feet during long silences, offering comfort no human words could match. When he passed, Daniel held the collar to his chest for hours, whispering goodbye through clenched tears. The day after Toby died, Daniel planted a small garden in the prison yard, a space inmates now call Toby's Place. It became a quiet refuge, a rare patch of peace where growth defies the concrete. Daniel never claimed to be redeemed, but he found a way to serve, to give, to make something right in a world where so much had gone wrong. And every time someone asked him how he held on, he'd simply answer, "He waited for me, so I had to become someone worth waiting for." Daniel Reed's journey, marked by Toby's unwavering loyalty, echoes as a powerful reminder. Hope can flourish even in the harshest circumstances, and unconditional love possesses the strength to restore lost humanity. Just as Toby waited, keeping alive the flame of connection, and one final wish rewrote destiny, each of us holds the power to impact lives. May this story inspire us to look around with greater compassion and empathy, recognizing the transformative potential within every being and the lasting impact of a genuine act of kindness. What connection moves you? Who or what drives you to become a better version of yourself, someone who, like Daniel, would be worth waiting for? Reflect and share the powerful message that it's never too late for change, and that love, in its purest forms, truly recalls what the world tries to erase.